In this video I'll be covering a water leak on the Gaggia Classic Coffee machine. This particular video pays attention to boiler repair where it's become corroded through age and the sort of things you're going to need to do before fitting a replacement seal kit. It goes without saying, but you're going to be dealing with water and mains equipment, so disconnect from the main supply before starting work. To carry out this repair you're going to need the following tools: a 12, a 13 and 17mm open-ended spanner, medium Phillips screwdriver, small flat blade screwdriver, 4 and 5mm Allen keys, small pliers, various sandpapers and brasso metal polish, and some marker pens for marking out the wires. In this video we're going to detail what you need to do if your Gaggia Classic or Gaggia Cubika starts to leak around certain parts. They're pretty robust coffee machines, but over time they can fail and tend to leak around this area here and just where the steamer spout is there as well. You can just see that in shot. And kits like this are readily available from eBay, and we're just going to detail what you need to do to fit one. Removing the lid. The lid is held in place by a couple of Phillips screws just in those holes there. Remove those and you should be able to pop the lid off, and it should be fairly obvious. There we go, there's water inside this machine, and it appears to be sort of everywhere really, but I suspect it's actually leaking from, and you can just see water on the bottom of the boiler there. And luckily in this kit there's a spare. Removing the boiler and dismantling the machine. Mark the cables to be removed with a pen. It makes reassembly much easier. The boiler removed from the coffee machine. Here's the boiler removed from the coffee machine itself. You can see where this one's been leaking, just between that join there. And once we've separated that, we'll be able to see what the quality of the faces are like, clean them up as required, and fit the new gaskets. There are other seals on the boiler that can be serviced, and these takeoffs here on the side, which feed the water into the main boiler and to the steamer wand, can also be replaced. But in this case they're not actually leaking, there's no water evidence around there at all, so I'm going to leave those well alone and just stick to the parts that are actually leaking. Separate the two boiler halves by removing the 4 5mm Allen screws. So with the two halves of the boiler separated, just removing the 5mm Allen screws holding it together, it's pretty obvious to see what's happened here. The rubber seal has failed over time. I suspect it's not been helped by the sort of mating surfaces becoming quite corroded there, so before all this goes back together they'll have to be cleaned up using some wet and dry paper and maybe even some cutting compound to get a really smooth finish. What I think I'll probably do is just use a little bit of silicone grease on there, obviously water safe silicone grease, so to try and prevent that happening again. But yeah, you can see what's happened here. So all this needs cleaning back up before any new rubber seals are fitted. This particular boiler is actually worse than I first thought. When I actually looked at it in closer detail, you can see it's severely pitted. I think I might be able to bring it back, but we'll have to have a few passes of some higher, or rather lower grade sandpaper before we can get down to the really fine stuff. This one's quite bad, and that's definitely the source of the leak on this particular machine. Because this boiler is so badly corroded, we're going to use 3 different types of sandpaper here. A really coarse one, it's about a P80 to a P120 to a P, I think this one's a P300, something like that. Anyway, rough, a little bit smoother, nice and fine, to get a nice smooth finish on the bottom of that boiler there. So after about 5 minutes on the really heavy aluminium oxide sandpaper, it's beginning to look a bit better, but still a long way to go to get all the corrosion back and get a nice flat surface. So quite a bit more on there before we go to the slightly finer stuff and then finish up on the ultra fine stuff. So after about 10 minutes, there's still a bit more to go. So it's worth actually putting a bit of tissue in there just to stop all the swarf and things you're going to be cutting off that face there falling into the machine. So I've just wedged that with a little bit of blue tail. But yeah, more cutting to do. Still a little bit of damage to get rid of before this will work again. After about half an hour of circular motion on the coarse sandpaper, it still looks like this, but that's still not good enough to go back together. So more sanding required and more cups of tea. After about an hour of rubbing down like this, you end up with something that looks a little bit like that. Not absolutely perfect, but time to move on to some medium then fine sandpaper. We can see there it's just started to become a bit smoother, ready to take the fine sandpaper next. So we start to see something that looks a bit like that. So after a little bit of polishing, here's the finished article ready to go back together. You can see it's not absolutely perfect, but much better than it was, and stands a fighting chance of actually sealing the 2 halves of the boiler back together again. The 2 halves of the boiler ready to be reassembled. When reassembling, tighten the screws back up diagonally. It's worth also saying that the reason this one wasn't performing very well is that all this strainer here on the bottom of the, I don't know what you call this, the bottom of the boiler was also blocked. So before this goes back together, we'll have to give this a descale with some white vinegar or something along those lines. Yeah, this will all need a clean. If you have a Gaggia Classic Coffee machine that needed this repair, I hope you found the video useful and I hope it saved you some money. Thanks for watching.